You never know when life is going to hand you a stretch test. Sometimes it's a new project at work. Sometimes it's a challenge in your personal life. Sometimes it's a new project at work and a challenge in your personal life at the exact same time. The reality is that we are all facing challenges. As leaders, we've got tighter budgets, teams getting reorganized, and technology changing faster than the week can go by. And yet, we all have to figure out how to show up at work in a world that is asking for more. When my husband and I first got married, we moved into this cute little cookie cutter starter home community where all the homes were exactly the same. When you went to your neighbor's house, you knew exactly where the bathroom was. There were lots of young couples, and we had date nights and game nights, and once a year we all brought our junk into one yard for our annual community yard sale. We basically just bought each other stuff and took it home, but as they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Over time, our friends started having more and more kids, and my husband and I stayed dinks, dual income, no kids, for a little while longer. About 4 years in, 2 events happened simultaneously that caused me to question. The first was an awesome celebration. I was promoted to the sales trainer at work, and so I just had lots of new responsibilities that were both stressful but also exciting. The second was the family across the street from us moved, and my husband and I literally prayed that a young couple with no kids would move in across the street. One summer day, I'm out to lunch with a friend, and I get a phone call from my husband. He doesn't say hello. He says, "I have good news and bad news." I said, "Okay." And he said, "The good news is there's a young couple just like us with no kids moving in across the street." And immediately I start planning date nights and maybe even a vacation together. When I remember what he said first, and I said, wait, what's the bad news? He said, "It's your ex-husband." And his new wife. So perhaps this is the point in the story where I tell you I was married before. Some people have starter homes. I had a starter husband. I did what any emotionally immature adult would do. I finished lunch, I went home, I grabbed a chair, plopped it in front of the living room window, sat down, and lifted the blinds ever so slightly. I sat there for 2 days. I'm not saying it was healthy, and yes, I ate and slept, but first I had to confirm that it was him, and then I had to see her, and then I could not pull myself away from the train wreck that was happening outside my front door. Here's the point. We're all dealing with people in our teams, in our communities, in our friend groups, but especially in our one-on-one conversations that are dealing with things you cannot see. And as you think about what they're doing, they then come to work and are trying to give them their best at work, and yet there could potentially be some challenges and some hiccups. Gone are the days where we can just expect people to have the same kind of reaction that we would have to the challenges that they're facing at home or at the office. We've evolved from bosses in the 60s and 70s to managers in the 80s and 90s to leaders in the 2000s. But my question is this. In today's complex, multi-generational workplace, is leadership enough? Because we are all faced with those challenges, having layoffs, reorganizing teams, and software that changes faster than job descriptions. And yet we're trying to figure out how we ourselves are going to do more with less. We can't continue to have conversations about high performance, leadership, and resilience in separate silos. They have to come together to help you build the kind of team that you need. And if you want to lead happy, high-performing teams, you need to understand and master stretch capacity. So in your bags, you do have a resistance band, and I'm going to ask you to grab it. It is either green or black, and it doesn't matter which color that you have. It is in a plastic container. You can take the plastic out. And as you find it, I would like you to put it in your hands just like this. Okay, and resist the urge to stretch it for just a minute. We're gonna all do it together and it's way more fun. Okay, so what I'm gonna ask you to do, put it in your hands like this. You'll put your thumb in the front so that you can have a good hold on it. When I say go, I'm gonna ask you just to stretch it apart however you can. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, now I want you to look around. If someone has a different color than you, I want you to stretch to them. Right? They are a little bit different. And yet they look like they're the exact same size. So the black resistance band is what they call extra heavy. The green one is what they call extra light. And your team is actually quite similar. You might have the teams with the exact same job descriptions, but wildly different stretch capacity. If you push too far, you'll hit burnout. But if you stretch just enough, you'll get the kind of resilience and personal audacity from each team member to be able to stretch and grow. Because in a world that talks about burnout regularly, it's not just about taking things off their plate. It's about asking, where can you still stretch? What can you do? Because good leaders know how to stretch their teams before they snap. And understanding the stretch capacity of each person that you work with will change the game. Because in the day and age that we live in, emotional intelligence is critical to the conversations that we need to be having. Because also, as we consider artificial intelligence changing the rules regularly, emotional intelligence must take center stage. We have to be having the conversations that will move the needle. Because here's the thing, it's not the absence of stretch that matters. Stretching is growth, and we can learn and grow new things. 2 quick case studies. The first is I worked with a VP level leader who had lots of great ideas. She was innovative, she was smart, and she regularly went to her CEO boss trying to provide suggestions of ways she could adapt her team or take on new projects, and he always shut her down. He did not like being challenged, and he did not like being stretched. And so she left. And the reality is that she didn't leave for more money or a better job title. She left because she wasn't being stretched. Many employees want to be stretched. They want to grow. They love challenge. One of our human innate needs is to be challenged so that we can grow. Now, the second story comes from my brother, who worked for a household name streaming company. His team had Nerf gun Fridays. They had breakfast and lunch in the break room, and every employee got a 6-month red carpet ceremony where they got their picture on the wall. A few months in after that, he received an email saying, "You won an Emmy." The company had won an Emmy for one of their original shows, and my brother is a computer programmer who works on payment gateways. And yet they invited everyone from the janitor to the producer to the party where they all got a picture with the Emmy. Only a year or 2 after that, the company was sold. And new leadership came in and quietly killed everything that made their teams fun and connected. Don't worry, they kept lunch in the break room, but then they tacked on more projects, more responsibility, and every person's job expanded. But now they're dealing with the stretch without benefits. Over time, retention dropped, morale sank, and my brother ultimately left. And I can't blame him. But in a world where budgets are becoming tighter, how do we still stretch our teams and help them to enjoy the culture of belonging and connection that matters, especially when we know they need to be stretched so they can grow? Now, last year, I conducted a research study trying to understand a little bit more about emotional intelligence in the workplace as leaders can influence it. And here's the headline. 90% of working Americans agree that if they had more resilience, they would be more innovative, more productive, and better team players. In fact, they would perform better in every workplace situation that we tested. And yet, we sometimes go back to our old ideas or the old views of what it looks like, forgetting that there are strategies that we can put in place to make stretch capacity matter so that team tenacity increases and people feel connected by their shared growth. So, with the time that we have together today, I want to share with you 2 strategies, one that is easy to implement and one that is worth the effort, but might take a little more strategy. The first is tell your team and tell yourself to come up with one-liners that will help you when you are stretched and tried. In the office, you might have someone that you struggle with. Maybe it's a team member you don't get along with as well as others. Maybe you have a phrase, "Can I be flexible here?" instead of frustrated. It opens up the possibilities, but keeps you positive. This also works in your personal life as well. I needed one of these one-liners every time I looked outside my front room window. It was one man's trash is another man's treasure. One man's trash is another man's treasure. One man's trash is another man's treasure. The second tool is teaching your teams to become problem solvers. Every CEO that I work with want employees that are willing to solve problems, and that is gold. But people aren't born problem solvers. It takes leadership tenacity to be able to train individuals to work in a world of and. Maybe they say, I know this project is hard, but you teach them to say yes, and I know we're going to find a solution. I know that the quotas just got reorganized, and now we're going to be struggling a little bit, and you will be able to get into the groove of this new role. But teach them through trainings, through one-on-one, to create the kind of stretch capacity necessary to build problem-solving skills. Because as you stretch, you build that strength, and as you teach that problem-solving, you build that strength as well. I know that in the world that we live in, things are a tiny bit tricky. And the work that we do is even harder because we're bringing those and marrying them at work. But if you want teams that innovate, collaborate, and stay, don't just lead them, stretch them. I would pray for you, but my prayers turn out weird. What I can tell you is that as you continue to work through stretch capacity for yourself, you'll be able to influence it among others. Because if you have the personal audacity to increase your stretch capacity, you will be able to influence team tenacity and turn potential into unstoppable high performance. Thank you.